Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening. You're welcome to Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, is it possible for the two key Ugandan political protagonists to engage in meaningful dialogue? What are the prerequisites for such an engagement? The media in Uganda today is awash with reports of a possible encounter between two key political foes, President Yoweri Museveni and FDC President Dr. Kizza Besigye. Dr. Besigye has disassociated himself from such plans, but people still think that he might be playing a political game, arguing that it's possible that the talks would have proceeded in secret if the media had not broken the story. The development has generated a public debate, with many people wondering if such talks are viable and are a solution to the challenges the country is facing currently, including a charged political environment characterized by fears of riots. In the past, talks between the government had been instituted, but they collapsed as fast as they began, as both sides traded accusations. Towards last year's elections, the inter-party political dialogue was initiated, involving all political parties with representation in parliament. Despite several resolutions aimed at improving governance issues and inculcating a spirit of nationalism among the political actors, these efforts passed without a positive result. While commenting on the possibility of direct talks between Dr. Besigye and President Museveni, key political actors have insisted that the challenges Uganda faces today cannot be reduced to an affair of the two. Even members of Dr. Besigye's political party, the FDC, have insisted that the party president has no power to engage in such talks without receiving authority from the party. So tonight we ask, is it possible for the two key political actors in Uganda to set aside their political differences and engage in dialogue? Also, can direct talks between President Museveni and his arch-rival, Dr. Kizza Besigye, be a solution to the political deadlock and other challenges we're facing today? Our guest tonight, retired Colonel Dr. Warren Kizza Besigye, President of the Forum for Democratic Change. You're most welcome, Dr. Besigye.
Thank you very much, and a good evening to all the Radio 1 listeners, wherever you are listening from, and Happy New Year.
Dr. Besigye, are you planning to meet President Museveni for talks after last year's elections?
You see, I get really amazed and sometimes irritated by people who seem not to have the slightest understanding about what the crisis in our country is all about. Over the last 10 years or so that I have been active in opposing government, you know, incessantly you find people who should know better, especially people, you know, who are educated and so on, who keep on saying that the problem is Museveni and Besigye. You know, ridiculous. Because I think even the most, you know, political and aware person should know that the problems of Uganda are far deeper and wider than just two personalities in this country. And therefore, I have said many times before that I have nothing personal against President Museveni. I can meet him. I have no problem meeting him. But it will not be to meet him so that we resolve Uganda's problems. We can meet if he wants me to talk about cows and things like that, but not to sort out Uganda's problems. We have made it very clear that Uganda's problems must be sorted out in a structured national dialogue. It cannot be an individual dialogue, some two people dialoguing. And we have made a demand for national dialogue right from 2001. Formally, we have been demanding dialogue. In 2001, that time we were in the reform agenda, we actually formally wrote to President Museveni demanding a dialogue, national dialogue. Eventually, when I was in exile in South Africa, a delegation led by the Honorable Sam Njuba, actually of Reform Agenda, actually met President Museveni to demand a national dialogue. And of course, it didn't materialize. What Museveni has indeed been trying to do is to, secure some kind of a public relations meeting, say that there has been a meeting between government and opposition without any chance of such a meeting leading to solutions that the country badly needs. And we have been very clear that we shall never be party to that kind of public relations exercise. That is why after the 2006 elections, when President Museveni invited the presidential candidates who had been in that election and the party leaders, we declined to participate. My colleagues in the other parties went and met him. And at that time, as you remember, I was castigated personally, and our party was castigated by some sections of those ignorant elites who are saying you are the ones who are against dialogue, you are the ones who don't want to give, our country a chance to have peace and so on and so forth. But we tell them, just people sitting together does not mean that there will be peace or there will be dialogue. As it turned out, my colleagues who sat with President Museveni, got nothing up to now. Nothing materialized. So there is no shortcut, my brothers and sisters out there, to a painstaking, structured national dialogue that would be transparent, that would be all-inclusive, and with the safeguards to ensure that whatever is agreed can actually be implemented. And so our demand for national dialogue has been accompanied with very clear parameters of what type of dialogue we need. And fortunately, we have also discussed this extensively with all the other political parties since the last election, 2011 elections. We had several meetings occasioned by an initiative of the Interreligious Council of Uganda, who indeed wanted to broker the starting of a dialogue process. And we presented to them what we considered as basics for having a credible process of dialogue. And there were a number of factors, but critically 4. One, that before any dialogue actually begins, we must agree on who the participants to the dialogue are. In other parties to the dialogue, we must agree on who are the parties to the dialogue, so that we have only credible parties to the dialogue. Secondly, that we have to agree on a moderator or mediator or facilitator of the dialogue, the one who would be conducting the dialogue, moderating the dialogue, as a neutral person agreeable to all parties. And 3, that we would need to agree on an agenda ahead of time. Unlike the meeting which we rejected to attend in President Museveni's house, where he just called us and said, come to discuss national issues. Which national issues? Must be structured. We must have an agenda so that all parties prepare for each point on the agenda. And we discuss it in a serious and structured way. So there must be an agenda, agreed agenda. We must agree ahead of time how to ensure that whatever is agreed can be implemented, guaranteeing implementation of decisions of the dialogue. These were the 4 key areas that we presented through the Interreligious Council initiative. We had also indicated that to provide the appropriate environment for dialogue, it would be necessary that the government unconditionally releases all political prisoners, people who have been arrested in political protests and all kinds of other political activities. And since we presented these to the Interreligious Council through their coordinator, Justice Ogola.
Yes, James Ogola.
Up to now, we have never had a feedback. We have never had a response. So, I do not know how a dialogue can take place unless these parameters that constitute the structuring of a dialogue can take place. Now, what am I saying? One is that, in principle, we consider that a national dialogue is very necessary for our country, and we are interested to participate in a national dialogue. But we are interested to participate in a particular type of dialogue that would have the chance of generating the results that would cause our country to have a transition from rule of the gun to rule of the people. That is the critical problem that we face as a country. Failure to make a transition from rule of the gun to rule by the people. And the dynamics to do so can come through two ways. One is a negotiated process, which is the dialogue. The other one, of course, is a revolution, as you've been seeing in other countries. Yes, both can lead to the transition. The preferred way is the dialogue process, which would lead to no loss of life, no loss of property, no disturbance of social systems, that schools close and, that go with revolutions, whether they are revolutions mediated by guns or not. It causes a lot of disturbance. So the first and best option would be to have a negotiated dialogue. But of course, if negotiated dialogues do not come because of intransigence of parties, that's what in many cases leads to actual revolutions.
Right.
But whichever way, our country simply has that test of how to make the transition. And we are interested in a dialogue whenever it is, even if it's tomorrow. If the people who control power now agreed to the terms of the dialogue that we have all given them, and these terms are given to them by all of us. As I've said, we all sat and agreed on these terms. If they agreed on them tomorrow, we would have dialogue going on tomorrow.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio, and tonight, is it possible for the two key Ugandan political protagonists to engage in meaningful dialogue? What are the prerequisites for such an engagement? Our guest is retired Colonel Dr. Warren Kizza, Besigye, President of the FDC, or Forum for Democratic Change. You'll be able to contribute to this discussion later. You'll be able to call in. You can also send your messages or questions via text. But you can also join us on Facebook, Spectrum Debate. Send your message. It will be read on air. If it's a question, the Colonel will answer it. Dr. Besigye, you say you want a transition from rule of the gun to rule by the people. We've had elections every 5 years. Some people will say the winner takes the elections. Where is the problem?
Well, you see, you can have elections of all kinds of types, or types, Anybody who has been living here will tell you that the elections we have had cannot be called democratic elections. Why? Because, this is a matter we have discussed very many times. Precisely the involvement of the military in mediating in elections, arresting people at polling stations and so on, even arresting candidates, beating up people and so on and so forth. Those are not democratic elections. Having an electoral commission who is just a walking stick of the president, as has been amply exemplified and demonstrated even in courts and so on and so forth. Those are not, democratic elections. The use of money, the country is in crisis today because of the money that was poured in the elections.
Yes.
Loaded from the treasury. So this, and all that happens because we have a regime that is not accountable to the people, who are there and say, whether you like it or not, we are here, we have our guns. We shall put out the members, and we shall tear gas everybody in the country and do whatever it takes to make sure that we have our way. Now all dictators now, it's fashionable to organize elections, but they are not. that does not mean that people have the power. So elections and people having power are completely different things.
So you're saying our elections are not credible, the ones we've had here?
It's not me just saying. I mean, it's any reasonable person that has in fact, even not witnessed, but that examines the structure of the state of Uganda cannot say the structure of the state of Uganda today has no capacity to bring forth a free and fair election. It simply doesn't happen. All institutions are personalized institutions, and that's why this corruption. People are talking about corruption. You can yell about corruption until the cows come back home, but as long as there are no fundamental checks and balances in the system of government, corruption will continue. This is why now literally everybody is in a court for corruption. The vice president, the prime minister, the ministers. Of course, all of those come from the president, who is the protector of the corruption and so on and so forth. So there is no way anybody can say that this is an accountable system of government, and that is the basic defect is that the power, people exercising power in the government do not consider the people as their masters. They consider people as their subjects who have no authority over them. And that is the basic dynamic that must change. And as I have said, it can change through dialogue. And that is the preferred way.
And why do you keep taking part in these elections that you say are incredible?
It's a process of struggle. Because if we had not taken part in the elections that we have, I think far less people today would have known exactly what we've been talking about. At every election, in fact, people are easily confused. They think that their will can be exercised and that it can bear fruit. But increasingly, as we have been going through election to election, everybody has been rallied to understand what type of election it is. So it's a process of struggle. It's a process of exposure. We use the campaigns, we go around, and in fact now, fortunately, whatever we've been telling them has been coming. Recently I was up country and one fellow was saying that, we must have some kind of messianic powers to predict exactly what is going to happen. Because even in the last election, I told them, this money which they are throwing around, you eat it and you'll see what will happen. And all of the people, those who ate some of that money, they are saying, had we listened, Had we known, because we are telling them this money is money they have stolen, first of all, from you, through the treasury, through the Bank of Uganda. It's your money which they have stolen. Now they know. Because since they ate that money in February, some have, of course, even already died through destitution, through lack of medicine, through all kinds of chaotic lack of food and so on, and their children out of schools and so on and so forth. So it's a process of exposure, it's a process of learning. And I think that is why today the people of Uganda are more assertive. People don't become assertive overnight. But today people are assertive, and I'm very happy. You've been seeing people protesting against Umeme. Some people are saying Besigye was the problem. I was seeing protests against Umeme when I was in New York. Nothing to do with it. So people are now assertive. They know that they won't get anything unless they fight for it. Unless they assert their rights, they want to get things. They want to get things done.
Okay.
And that is what will actually lead to a sustainable democratic dispensation, because people will know that through practice that they have power and that they can exercise their power over all other entities, including guns, that they can exercise their power. That is when we shall have real transformation, because whoever then comes into government, whether it is a Kizza, Besigye, or some other whatever, will have to act according to people's demands. And if he doesn't, they'll handle him and throw him out and impose sanctions on him or whatever it is, like happened in other countries. So I'm personally very optimistic about what is going on. And this is why at the end of last year I was saying I can see 2012 being a year of change. People are determined not to continue living in the horrible conditions they are. They know that they can achieve better. And all they need is to rally together, to be better organized, and to assert themselves.
And this kind of dialogue, what can we expect to get from it? A coalition government or what?
Well, first of all, the dialogue would cause some kind of a consensus on key areas where there are controversies. Consensus on how to have democratic processes, for example, which are the processes that would then generate the policies. In the dialogue, we don't have to go and discuss how the economy can be managed. I don't think that that would be the most important thing, because policies, if we had a democratic dispensation, then political parties would argue on policies, and whoever has better policies would be in government and would implement those policies. If they fail, they throw him out. So the dialogue is to set a framework for having a fair and just system of government. That is the most important thing for the dialogue. And once you have a fair and just system of government, then it will produce the policies that are aligned with the people. And those policies can be implemented. People will ensure that there is performance. If there is no performance, they can change the government, and so on and so forth. So the dialogue has a limited scope. But it may be necessary, arising out of the dialogue, to have a transition mechanism that would implement the decisions of the dialogue, because the framework that is there, which is not satisfactory, which is the reason you have a dialogue, may not be the appropriate framework to implement what you have decided. in terms of what needs to be done to make a better system.
That's very interesting. This is Spectrum listeners on radio, and tonight, is it possible for the two key Ugandan political protagonists to engage in a meaningful dialogue, and what other prerequisites for such an engagement? Our guest is retired Colonel Dr. Kizza, Besigye, president of the FDC. We'll go for a break right now. We'll be back.
Excuse me, would you like to hear about the MTN Pilipili? It has a really long battery life.
That's hot.
And it has an amazing built-in FM radio.
That's hot.
And you're never in the dark because it has a great torch.
That's really hot.
And it's only 39,500 shillings.
That's hot too.
And she gave me your phone number because I'm really cool.
That's hot. Wait, what?
Get the hot MTN Pilipili mobile phone at MTN service centers and select dealer shops. MTN, everywhere you go.
Just like an uncut diamond is brought to life by unmatched skill and dedication, only our brewmaster holds the secret to crafting a crystal malt lager. Under the exacting international standards at Nile Breweries, he uses only the finest, most carefully selected grains of roasted crystal malt and sets in motion the delicate process of releasing their full roast. The result is a world-class beer with a fresher aroma, a richer golden color, and a maltier taste.
Nile Gold Crystal Malt Lager. Beyond an ordinary malt.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum. Tonight, is it possible for the two key Ugandan political protagonists to engage in meaningful dialogue? Also, what are the prerequisites for such an engagement? Our guest tonight, retired Colonel Dr. Warren Kizza, president of the Forum for Democratic Change. You'll be able to call in and contribute to this discussion or send text messages. What you do is type the word Spectrum. Question messages, comment, send it 7197, or join us on Spectrum Debate, or that is on Facebook, to send your question, which will be passed on before the end of this discussion. Dr. Besigye, you mentioned a transition mechanism. What kind of thing are you talking about? You will break down the state, and how do you do it? A coalition government? Give us more clarity.
Well, it can take many forms, and I think it would be jumping the gun to discuss what needs to be discussed.
Well, but you're talking about a big thing. You're talking about a transition mechanism. Some people think they have an elected government, but you're saying what kind of, is it a power sharing arrangement? Does the president step aside?
You see, the moment you think that you have an elected government, you have no political problems, this is a credible government through a credible election, functioning institutions, you don't need a dialogue. You don't need a national dialogue. A national dialogue only comes when there is a big fracture, when the system is, when there are fundamental defects in the system. That's what calls for a national dialogue. Otherwise, if it is just, discussing minor policy changes and so on, they can be done in the framework of government, in the parliament, in the district councils, and so on and so forth. The moment you think you need a national dialogue, it means that there is a national crisis.
You're talking about parallels like Kenya and Zimbabwe. Is that what you're talking about?
There are many situations where there have been transitions, and as I have said, the transition is a qualitative one. It's a transition from a framework of government based on authoritarian rule, the rule of the gun, to one where you can have a democratic dispensation. Democratic transitions are actually phenomena that has been studied. People have even written so many books about democratic transition. They take many forms. Every country has its own unique way of managing transitions. They don't have to be managed in the same way. But the important thing is the essence. The essence of the transition is that you have a mechanism which has the capacity to implement that which will cause the changes. the structure and the system of government that is there, which you are trying to change, cannot by itself change, mutate by itself and implement those changes. And unfortunately, even here, the intention of the NRM was to organize a transition. 1986
Yes.
to 1990
Was supposed to be a transition.
was supposed to be a transition process.
They called it an interim government.
Yes, it was supposed to be a transitional period.
Right.
And what was intended to be done then is what unfortunately was not done.
Well, but they said they would give us a new constitution.
that transition did not take place.
Well, but they gave us a new constitution. They said 1993 CA elections, 1995 a new constitution. It took time, but they gave it to us.
Yes, and that is why, if that had happened, there would be no contention. The fact that there are these deep contentions is that transition actually did not take place. And it's always attractive. This is what I'm saying, that it's always attractive for people not to want to change to their disfavor. So the people who were in authority in the NRM then, because the NRM had secured total victory through war, was in complete control of all levers of power.
Yes.
Although initially the NRM tried to bring in other players, they did in a broad-based government.
Yes.
You will realize that by the time of the actual transition, all the other players had been purged out of the system.
Well, Samogere stood against Museveni on his own.
Yes, but DP was really no longer. They were never partners, even in the transitional process. There was cooptation. Some people were co-opted into the NRM transitional government, but there was no transitional mechanism that was negotiated that would ensure that whatever is, that first of all, that all the issues would be freely and fairly discussed, and eventually that whatever is decided would be appropriately implemented. There was no mechanism. It was purely an NRM thing. And whoever did not agree with the NRM thing fell out. And so it was the mismanagement of that transition actually that leads us to another need for that transition to happen.
Okay. Well, but some people will say everything is working very well. They don't need you. They don't need a national dialogue. What happened?
Fine. If everything is going well, who is nobody, who is grudging those who think everything is going well. And if everything is going well, why would there be members at every corner of the town? And why, instead of importing medicine, why are we importing tear gas and all kinds of riot control mechanisms? Why? If everything is okay, why buy jets at $780 million when there is no medicine in the hospitals and so on? If everything is okay, I have no problem. Because this is why I'm saying that this matter is not a personal matter. I am not in this opposition for my personal reasons, not at all. And that's why I told you that I get completely irritated when I hear people saying this is a Besigye thing. Besigye for what? If it doesn't affect you, fine. You continue enjoying wherever you are enjoying. But eventually it catches up with you, you see. And today, happily, it has caught up with nearly everybody. And that is why there is this talk of now dialogue. Before, when there were still many people who were in slumber, who were saying, we are still enjoying our sleep. We are still enjoying our sleep. There was less pressure for dialogue. But nobody can enjoy the sleep, whether the guns are being fired or not. The crisis is there for everybody to witness. But I'm sure there are still a few people who are either completely decadent, those who are beneficiaries of the corruption and who have become completely decadent and don't know that there is a problem out there, or those who are simply hiding their heads in the sand. But there is clearly a crisis, all-round crisis, and the area that the managers of the politics now realize and seek to have genuine dialogue, the better for everybody, including themselves. Otherwise, people are always thinking I'm too bright, I'm very clever, I can manipulate this, I can manipulate that, I will overcome this and I will take the other advantage. And normally what happens is that all of a sudden they find that it is too late. That's how all these humiliated dictators have become so humiliated. So it's really a choice that especially those who are in power have to make. They have the initiative because we can't force anything on them. They have the power. They can use it judiciously, cleverly, or they can squander the opportunities and to the disadvantage of the country and definitely to their own personal disadvantages.
All right, and if there's not dialogue, like you say, what next for 2012? You say,
well, as I have said, you see, there are two tracks. One is the negotiated one, the other one is the forceful one.
What do you mean forceful?
People simply saying enough is enough, get out, and rioting.
Are you organizing something?
Well, there is no reason why we shouldn't organize, you see. Then this is where the government, is I think out of depth with reality. There is no reason. It's our right to organize, to oppose the rot that is going on. It's our right. It's our fundamental right.
According to the Constitution?
Yes. We would be, in fact, simply abdicating our responsibilities if we don't organize to challenge what is going on. We must organize. We must inform the people on how we can get rid of this and rally them to get rid of this. That's why protests are protected by the Constitution, that people can demonstrate against the government. It's provided.
Right.
And part of that demonstration can be that we demonstrate until this government goes. It's a legitimate demonstration.
With bare arms, peaceful demonstration.
Peaceful demonstration. And that's what we've been emphasizing. Because violent, armed revolutions do not lead to a transition from the guns to the power of the people. They only lead to transition from one set of gun rampaging group to another group of gun rampagers. That's not what we are looking for. We've tested it. We suffered in the bush. Many of our colleagues died and so on. And we have another situation we have to deal with. So, experience has shown that the best way is simply to get the ordinary people of Uganda to peacefully say enough is enough, and to rally together to get rid of the dictatorship. And so there are really two tracks. We advocate dialogue, but we organize, and we are going to be more vigorous in organizing.
This year?
Oh, definitely, without doubt.
But the religious leaders have said don't do it.
Well, the religious leaders and their pajeros, I don't care about them.
Talk to us about that. The religious leaders and their pajeros.
Yes, because the part of the problem of the corruption in Uganda is, in fact, the system, the patrimonial system, is that which causes people to seek and receive favors And I have had, very frank discussions with some of the religious leaders whom I believe have been compromised. By
religious leaders have been compromised?
Yes. Not all of them. Not all of them.
Yes.
I mean, they are very, very people, very, high integrity and, exceptional standing in the religious leaders. But there are those who, like in other sectors, become co-opted.
Right.
Become co-opted into the patrimonial system.
All right.
And so if you hear a voice because some bishop or some sheikh or somebody has said something in support of the government, don't say religious leaders have said. No, not at all.
This is Spectrum. You can call in now. Listeners, on our number 0414-348-111, 0312-260390, 0312-261390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Spectrum, hello?
I salute you this evening.
Yes, sir, your name?
This is Nani other than Besigye Muhammadi from Kawempe, North Southwest. Dr. Besigye, my president, I salute you also. But Mr. Besigye, I have hope in you because I know that the only person who can deliver this country from where it is none other than Dr. Kizza Besigye. But our worry is we are not happy with the discussion or to sit with President Museveni. Because President Museveni has been the opposition leaders, like he called Agina Santebagala, but where is the Agina Santebagala is? Because President Museveni is a competent man. So that's one we disagree with that.
All right. Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir, your name?
Hello?
Hello, your name?
Yes, Edmond.
Yes, your name?
Good evening to you.
Good evening.
This is Kalama Christopher calling from Rosida. Now, Besigye, I agree with you in so many points. But now there is a certain point that confused me. You said that the presidential elections, I think they have been unfair ever since maybe you started competing in them. But we see there are some constituencies whereby we see opposition leaders taking off. I just don't know what do you think the secret is?
Sometimes winning. Spectrum, hello? Hello? All right.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Please tell us your name.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Your name?
Kizza is my name.
Yes.
I welcome our guest, but I only want to say that his tone, especially when he's referring to our religious leaders, I think their statement to call for peace and avoid the riots that have rampaged this country was aimed at promoting dialogue, like he's saying. For him to call the name disrespectful like he has done, I think it's unfortunate, and that is not the leader we want for this country. Thank you very much.
Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Good evening, Wambi Michael.
Yes, Michael.
I just want to ask Dr. Kizza Besigye, does he mean that Andrew Mwenda and Conrad Nkutu can genuinely bring him on table with the President Museveni? And the other issue is, can he tell us where the origin of this stock business came from?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Yes, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Your name?
Dale is my name.
Yes, Dale.
I thank you for bringing Richard Kano to your studio, and I also thank Dr. Kizza Besigye for his wonderful presentation. And also have now this time reduced on the topic and also think about reconciliation and dialogue as the best solution for this country. I do believe that force and demonstration may not bring solution, but only dialoguing. I really applaud him for that approach so that we can build our country, Uganda, together. Uganda does not belong to him and the President alone, but for all of us. So I really thank him for the new approach and abandoning the mentality of force and aggression. I thank you.
Spectrum, hello.
Good evening, Edmond.
Good evening, your name?
I'm as usual.
Our final caller, yes?
Dr. Kano Besigye, FCC reader. Mine is very simple. First and foremost, I want to salute him for competing in the last election. And another issue is about our economy. as far as the economy is concerned, we all agree that people, though they are in a very bad shape, the economy is bad shape, they have their own support, the president of their own choice. But even if this is being given power today, the same civil servants, administrators, the people who are working within the government, don't think that you may change this contract overnight. These are the same people. Even you are also in the government. You remember you were state minister for internal affairs. You were an officer in UPDF. You know how people do. The way they corrupt, they are corrupt. So to me, my point is just tell you that even if today, if this is being given power today, we are going to face the scenario what we are facing.
There's no solution at all. We should forget about getting a solution.
All right, let's get the responses from you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank all those who have been able to call in the short time that is available, starting with Mr. Segirinya. Mr. Segirinya says he does not trust Mr. Museveni, and therefore there should be no dialogue. I agree with you that there is no basis for trusting Mr. Museveni. But to say that therefore there should be no dialogue, I think would be a mistake. What we need to do is to have safeguards to ensure that the areas where we are distrustful are not manipulated, that the process is not manipulated, and that whatever is decided has guarantees that it can be implemented. That is why we are being extremely focused on the process. It should not be any dialogue process, not at all. And that's why we refuse to go for the tea parties they have been calling. We want a serious process with sufficient safeguards and mechanisms that can ensure that the outcomes are credible and are implementable. So the thing is, we must talk about the safeguards, but not be completely pessimistic and say because we don't trust Mr. Museveni, we shall never talk to him. No, I think that would be negative. Mr. Christopher was saying, why do the opposition win in some areas? Because opposition wins in some areas does not mean that there is a democratic dispensation. It doesn't. Otherwise, you would maybe argue that because they are genocide survivors, there was no genocide. You know, in every bad situation, you can have survivors. So the people who are elected in a rigged process. Even in a rigged process, that shows you that the situation in those areas is so bad for the government that even with all the rigging they do, they still fail to achieve the objective of winning. And in some other areas, they don't also engage in rigging in order to create the impression that you have, that you can see opposition was able to win there because they deliberately did not do anything to stop them from winning in those particular token areas. Now, on the question of religious leaders, I must, if I created the impression that I have no respect for religious leaders, I must profusely apologize. That was not my intention. I have great respect for the institution of religious leaders, and that is in fact why we took their initiative very seriously, the initiative of the Interreligious Council. We engaged with it fully. We take the institution of the religious leaders very seriously. Even in our own manifesto, by the way, we talk about not treating religious institutions with the tokenism that the government has been doing, you know, and subjectiveness. If the president likes you, he gives you a vehicle. If he doesn't like you, for you, you don't get anything when you are being consecrated. No, and this is public money. It's not the president selling his cows. This is public money. If there is public money, there must be a policy on how to give support to religious institutions, institutionally, not on the whims of a person. So I have great respect for the institution. I have great respect for many of the religious leaders, but certainly I have contempt for some of them who sell themselves to government, and they are there. You know, and as I have said, they are the minority.
Right.
But you know,
they also have a voice, don't they?
Yes, and I think the religious institutions themselves have a role to really prevent that,
right,
or reduce it. Because, you know, a rotten tomato will cause the whole basket to get into problems.
Okay, Richard, kind of maybe...
Now, on the question of the origin of the current talk about talks,
yes,
I think there is no doubt that it has been choreographed by the government.
It has been choreographed by the
In
government.
fact, from what I read in the New Vision story, they said they got the information from State House. And I think it has been for particular purposes. One, I think the whole choreography was intended to divert the country from the focus it had on the corruption, which has been capturing the attention of the country. You know, even now we are here talking about something which has been going on for years.
Yes.
This dialogue thing. We are not talking about the
essential
motions which are going on with the ministers that are still carrying away our money. So I think part of it was to cause a diversion at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
But secondly, to cause divisions within the opposition, because you see they are portraying it as if Besigye is cutting some secret deals with Museveni, which is not there.
Okay.
Besigye will never cut secret deals with anybody, especially when we are talking about national issues.
Okay, what time is...
So I think the origin is clear, and the intention I can only guess, as I have said.
Okay.
Now the question of
whether you would change anything.
Before whether we would change anything, the question of saying that the only way is dialogue, that there is no other way, that is self-defeating, because dialogue takes two people.
Yes.
So from his own argument, if the other party does not want dialogue, it means there would never be change in the country.
Okay.
Now that is ridiculous.
All right.
So yes, we should put pressure on everybody to undertake dialogue.
Yes.
But if there is intransigence, we should force it. We should force the transition.
Okay.
Now on the question of change, whether when you change government, you can change people and change what they have been doing. Of course. I mean, look, even in our own neighborhood, look at Rwanda.
Yes.
You know, why is there no corruption in Rwanda?
Right.
Or not as much corruption? Why is there clean? Why do they have clean towns? Why do they have, you know? Yes. People, that is why there is this whole question of leadership.
Right.
And whoever suggested that the fish rots from the top was correct. Trouble comes from the top.
Yes.
If the top is clean, if the top has a direction that is correct, then the others will follow.
All right.
And so this defeatist attitude,
you don't agree with it?
It's deliberate. It's a defeatist attitude that is being pervaded by people. They call themselves cadres of NRM.
Right.
They are the ones who say, you know, corruption can't go.
Right.
Everybody is corrupt. Whoever comes will be corrupt. You know, as if there is no. So, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, time I think has cut us off.
Yes.
I must thank you very much, Edmond and Radio 1 Spectrum, for inviting me this evening, and I thank all those who have been able to comment on whatever we've been discussing, and I really wish you a better year to 2012 than last year. But remember, change will not come by itself. Let's fold our sleeves and work for change.
Thank you very much, Richard Colonel Dr. Kizza, the President of the FDC. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. So some of the messages we received, most of them have been answered. Thank you for sending in those messages and for calling in. Stay tuned to Radio 1.